Through the attorneys for both Bryan Kohberger and the state of Idaho, the public learned a lot that had yet to be disclosed about the case during the hearing proceedings on Thursday, January 23rd and Friday, January 24th. In this video, we are going to be talking about the surviving roommates, some of the issues that were brought up in the hearing, and in particular, what was going on with their phone activity and what were they doing specifically around the time of the murders and right after. Also, during these hearing proceedings, a bomb was dropped by the defense that debunks or clarifies theories that people have had about this crime since the beginning. We're going to start by talking about that bomb that was dropped.
Inside the house, in a bedroom with an open door, where the other bedrooms that contained people that died, their bedroom doors were open, and this dog had not tracked any blood around. The dog had no blood on it whatsoever.
Did you catch it? Let's listen again to just a little part of that, of Ann Taylor speaking to the court in that segment.
The other bedrooms that contained people that died, their bedroom doors were open.
The other bedrooms that contained people that had died, victims, the bedroom doors were open. What? Now, before we talk about the questions that are popping up in your head that have already come up in my mind, let me just address a few of them. The bedrooms, she says, bedrooms plural, that contained people that had died, those doors were open. So she definitely, at least in the way she's presenting it to the court right now, is talking about two bedroom doors, or rather more than one bedroom door, because she says Ann Taylor said bedrooms and was referring to more than one bedroom door that contained victims was open.
The other bedrooms that contained people that died, their bedroom doors were open.
Now, additionally, you can create a scenario in your mind where you say, okay, she's talking about bedroom doors, two bedroom doors that contained victims that were open. Eventually, obviously, the bedroom doors were open. First responders came in, had to open the bedroom doors if they were in fact closed to get to the victims, and ultimately the bedroom doors were open. But the way that she is presenting this fact in case as a fact leads me to believe that the bedroom doors were open since after the crime happened indefinitely, taking into account what law enforcement learned from the roommates and from the friends that the roommates summoned that may have gone into the house through their interviews with them. Now, this all ultimately has to speak to how this horrible scene was found, who found the scene, why the roommates didn't call 911 for 8 hours, and also the friends that were summoned to the house that morning, as Chief James Fry said. About a year ago, Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show spoke to Kristi Goncalves. He did a live stream talking about some of the things that they discussed when they were having a discussion about all of the rhetoric, the true things, the false rumors that were going around about this case. And as he was talking about that, he disclosed that he learned, apparently from Kristi Goncalves, that Ethan's body was blocking the door. At least that's how I took it. Now, this is a call-in show that I'm going to play to the Drunk Turkey Show, and they are discussing a topic that's been discussed since forever in this case, and that is that the 911 call came in as an unconscious person's call, which, as we all know, doesn't seem congruent with the scene and the amount of blood on the scene as we know it to be. Listen here to what Daniel has to say.
From what I understand, why it came out as an unconscious individual was probably a lot of panic. From what I understand is that Hunter Johnson got a call from one of the girls or both of the girls. I'm not sure, but he had told the Goncalves that he had gotten a call from the girls to go over, and he got there. He went to their rooms, to the second floor, tried to get in. It was blocked, is the term that he had used, and then he was able to push the door open slightly enough to look into it, and he saw the scene, right? And there was apparently a body that was blocking the door. And so I don't think that Dylan or Bethany, I think if there's a possibility that that maybe Dylan went to the first floor in the morning or something like that. But I don't think that Dylan or Bethany ever actually checked the second floor door. And I don't think that they actually checked, the third floor either. I think that they, were in a panic, heard some noises. And with that being said, they, called their friends to go look because they were too scared.
Now, if the bedroom doors were open to both of the bedrooms containing victims, then it is hard to make sense of the idea that Dylan and Bethany first had to summon their friends over before the bodies were discovered because they didn't know what happened or they didn't see the scene that was present in their house this morning. It just raises a lot more questions about what happened that morning to know that both bedroom doors were open.
People have been describing this as incredibly the worst bloody or the bloodiest scene that I've ever seen. They've been describing this the scene of the four victims as being so bloody. So it doesn't really make sense to me that that this person would have thought that the person was just unconscious. And even if they did, why do you call your friends instead of calling for medical help?
That has been a question since this crime happened in 2022, and I guess we still have more questions and answers. Now, regarding the possibility of both bedroom doors being opened, therefore, it couldn't possibly have been the case that Ethan's body was behind Xana's bedroom door, therefore blocking the door so nobody could get it open. I personally had never thought that that was the case. From the information this channel has learned from our inside sources, who are people that happen to be friends with Ethan Chapin, that's how they're connected most strongly to this case. From what they understand, Ethan was tragically found on the bed, on Xana Kernodle's bed, which makes perfect sense to me because we see the picture of the blood on the exterior of 1122 King Road. And where that spot is, where you can see the blood on the outside of the house, it is directly beneath Xana Kernodle's bed. Now let's take a listen to what Ann Taylor said about the witness statement from Dylan Mortensen. She was raising questions about the legitimacy of Dylan Morton's statement. And then we'll hear what the state had to say about it. And then we're going to go into what we actually know about the roommates' experience that night based on fact and source-generated information.
Person that was interviewed said that she heard things and saw things within her house. But what is written in the probable cause affidavit is seriously lacking in detail. It's wrong and it's false in many places. The way the affidavit reads, it says, this person stated she went to sleep on the second floor. She was awoken at 4 by what she stated sounded like one of the victims playing with the dog, which was on the third floor. A short time later, she thought she heard one of the victims say something. That caveat, she thought she heard, is a problem. That's not at all what was said. This person was interviewed shortly after 911 was called in the afternoon of November 13th, 2022. And she was sure, I'm at Defendant's Exhibit 8A, page 281, lines 4 through 10, when this witness was sure that she heard this particular victim go up the stairs, and then come running back down the stairs.
Now, Ann Taylor also brought up some issues that she perceived with the witness, Dylan Mortensen, incorrectly describing the appearance or the stature of Bryan Kohberger. And this is what the state had to say about that.
In that general description, which is what was provided in the PC affidavit, was consistent throughout all of her interviews. She described seeing someone wearing all black, a mask with only a portion of their face showing and visible. This person was male, white, She heard a voice that was not something that she recognized. The person was a slim, skinny, lean build. And the person was taller than she is around 5'8".
Now, my friends, let's take a deep dive into what we know Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk did that evening based on facts that we know that were disclosed from law enforcement through the PCA or otherwise, and inside source-based information. In this next clip, and it's from just the other day, and today is January 27th, 2025, Ashley Banfield discusses some of the information that came forth through the hearings from last week that we had not known before, or rather I should say that had not been confirmed before by either the defense or the prosecution. Gag order.
Listen, these are a lot of details I had not heard before. They were new, and considering the fact that it's been 2 years, we've been starved to learn something about this case. Do you see what we are having laid out as significant to the case?
I think all of it is, Ashley, because we've been wanting more information, all of us, including the victims' family members, to learn any granular piece of evidence and information about it as we've been moving through this slow process of getting to trial. So yes, you're right. I mean, everybody's ears perked up that we're listening in to this hearing today. This spanned the course of a couple of days, and some of it was open, some of it was closed, meaning that the cameras were up for part of it and the cameras were down for a lot of it. And that was really frustrating to victims' family members who were there at the court, and also to us that were trying to monitor every single thing. And it's important to note, too, that Bryan Kohberger's defense team had argued that all of it should be open. They also wanted it open for transparency. The judge ruling that some of the information that was talked about in these last few days of hearings did need to be kept private so that it wouldn't taint any potential jury pool. But you're right. I mean, any little new piece of information is important because, to your point, we hadn't heard that before.
This gag order has just driven me crazy. I understand when courts do it. I feel as though this particular process has been shrouded in, exhaustive secrecy. I was very interested about this comment, though, that Dylan might have been texting after she saw the shadowy figure. A lot of people are very hard on her, and they don't sort of go back to the contemporaneous time where she hears noise. It's a party house, so why wouldn't it just be her roommates being rambunctious? And she sees a shadowy figure.
Right.
It's a party house, so why wouldn't it be a friend of one of the rambunctious roommates or a DoorDash delivery? The last thing on her mind, or any of our minds, would be, I wonder if a quadruple murder just happened in my home. So what difference does it make if she texted before or after she saw the shadowy figure with the bushy eyebrows?
Yeah, it's going to be about the words, right? We all want to know what was said, and to the point made in court over the last few days on this issue is the timestamp, right? So as we compare the white car outside as it was picked up on surveillance, as we talk about the footsteps that were heard within the house and her thinking that she was listening maybe to Kaylee playing with her dog with the kind of loud thumps that were going on, it's all going to be laid over once we get to trial, once we get those transcripts, that information, if it does become public, to what she was saying. Is she saying, wow, my roommates are being really noisy, or is she saying, I think somebody's in the house? I don't think it's clear exactly what the words were, but hearing now that she might have been texting during that time. And to your point there, you said at the top, that she had been out, as most of them were. This was a party house. She said that she wasn't sure if it was real or not. I mean, if you wake up to what they woke up to, I think the prosecution said, in fact, of course you don't know if it's real or if it's not because it's so horrific. And then you find out that, yes, in fact, this is not a dream. This is a nightmare that you are waking up to that is very much real. Ashley.
Yeah, I'll say, they're trying to drill down on her memory issues, that she'd had a few drinks, that she didn't know if she was dreaming or not. Hello. This is a young woman who is your best shot. That you never get an eyewitness to something like this. And so to question her, I suppose it's Ann Taylor's job.
Okay, now we're going to rewind, going back in time over the past year. Well, actually, over the past well, since this happened, because one of the sources came out on Reddit, and that is Ethan Chapin's sister-in-law a really, really long time ago relative to when this crime happened.
According to the Daily Mail, Ethan Chapin's sister-in-law posted on Reddit that D, which we understand to mean Dylan Mortensen, quote, supposedly called all the girls in the house after crying and screaming stopped, and no one answered. And she still didn't call the police. She goes on, quote, she needs to explain herself and her actions that night. We don't have anything more from the sister-in-law on that, but you can bet if she knows something along these lines, she may be a witness.
So sources that have disclosed that Dylan Mortensen was texting right during or after the time of the tragedy are Kristi Goncalves, Steve Goncalves, apparently, as reported by Howard Blum, as told from a grand jury witness who still remains unnamed. Also, Ethan Chapin's sister-in-law, also Ashley Banfield, sources, whoever they may be, and additionally, and the one that I can stand by the most, are the two students this channel has been talking to since right after this tragedy occurred, students from University of Idaho who reported the same thing, that Dylan Mortensen was texting, but then gave us even more detail. So this is how that all breaks down. So many questions are asked about the surviving roommates of the IDAHO4 tragedy, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. From my perspective, questions from all of you and also in my own mind pertain primarily to Dylan Mortensen, and I think that is because what we've learned through the probable cause affidavit, we know certain things that Dylan Mortensen saw, things that she heard, and we get a sense of the apprehension and trepidation she was experiencing on that evening when she looked out her door on 3 different occasions. The words that she believes that she heard were troubling. Things like Kelly Goncalves saying, I think somebody's here, and then hearing Xana crying, and then hearing a male voice saying, it's okay, I'm going to help you, clearly alarmed her because at the end of the day, she claimed she was in a frozen shock phase. You may have seen I posted a video just a few days ago that talks about the 5 common responses that human beings have to extreme fear, shock, and trauma, the 5 F's as we call them, and human beings don't have a choice over how they react to extreme fear, shock, or trauma when we encounter it, because it is our survival instinct that takes over and guides us through that. It's really an involuntary response. Nevertheless, there are questions that remain about what happened that evening after specifically Dylan Mortensen heard and saw certain things. And of course, there is the big question, why the 8-hour time lapse between when the tragedies occurred and when 911 was finally called. We have information from Kristi Goncalves, who spoke with Danielle from the Drunk Turkey Show and shared with the creators some details of her experience and what she knows from the perspective of the victims' families. Kristi Goncalves did not herself speak. She spoke to Daniel, the creator of the Drunk Turkey Show, or one of the creators, and he then relayed to us through a live stream what she said. And what Kristi Goncalves had to say about Dylan Mortensen's actions that evening was a shocking confirmation. So in talking to the Drunk Turkey Show, Mrs. Goncalves makes a reference to the probable cause affidavit and the estimated time of the attack according to the probable cause affidavit. 5 pages into the PCA, following the section where the author of the PCA talks about the statements that Dylan Mortensen made to investigators that describe what she heard and saw, this is said regarding the time of the attacks.
The combination of Dylan Mortensen's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen's phone, and video of a suspect as described below leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. So what Callie's mother shared with Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show that she had not spoken about before, and surprisingly, neither had her husband Steve, was that she had been made aware that after Dylan Mortensen saw that figure clad in black and heard all of the things she heard and was, according to her, in a frozen shock phase, she called all of the roommates in the house to check up on them to see what was going on, if they were okay, because obviously she was very alarmed.
Now, later on, we learned through Howard Blum's book about this tragedy that Steve Goncalves apparently corroborated exactly what Kristi Goncalves had said to Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show. Now, there has been some speculation about the claims made in the Howard Blum book and what Steve Goncalves said. Apparently, the information that he learned was from a witness from the grand jury proceedings that indicted Bryan Kohberger, but that person or that informant still remains anonymous. Now, apparently, the information that Steve Goncalves learned from that grand jury informant said that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were, in fact, in communication, texting while the attacks were going on at 1122 King Road and after. Now, although it came from two different sources, the couple, Kristi and Steve Goncalves, essentially disclosed the exact same thing about the texting activity of Dylan Mortensen on that tragic night or in those early morning hours. So going back to Kristi Goncalves,
Kristi Goncalves said that she came to know that the estimated time of the attack in the probable cause affidavit was largely due to the records from Dylan's phone and her contacting all of the roommates in the house at a certain time. So that most likely was right before 4:25. Hence, the time frame that investigators narrowed it down to was the attacks being between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Of course, with these other two pieces of information that they mention. Now, I think it is very interesting that in the probable cause affidavit, they say that they determined the likely time of the attacks due to these three things. And how interesting is this? So these three factors are: number one, Dylan Mortensen's statement to investigators; number two, forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones; and number three, videos of a car in the area that appeared to be driving around in an unusual way or pattern. And we've learned some details about that. So you have to ask yourself, what is it about each of these three items that allowed investigators to zoom in on that time frame from 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m. as being the likely time of the attacks? Well, I think number three, the videos of the car in the area moving around, I think that one is rather obvious. So let's look at number one and number two. Number one, Dylan Mortensen's statements to investigators. So we know what Dylan said that caused investigators to perhaps start that time frame at 4 a.m. According to the PCA, it is said that Dylan told investigators that she woke up around 4 a.m. because she heard certain noises, right? But is it also something in Dylan's statements that we do not know that caused them to close out that time frame at 4:25 a.m.? Or number two, looking at the idea of it was in part the forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones that allowed them to zero in on the time frame 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m.
So we can certainly surmise that there must have been activity on Dylan's phone that helped them to determine that time frame. But look, oh, also Bethany's phone. I mean, what Kristi Goncalves shared with the Drunk Turkey Show, that we learned that Dylan Mortensen contacted all of the roommates after she knew that something was very strange and she saw the man clad in black with the bushy eyebrows. That makes sense that if Dylan Mortensen was texting or calling everybody, it would have been the forensic download of her phone that gave them an indicator of this time frame. But they specifically also mentioned Bethany's phone. So what is it about Bethany's phone, or that is on Bethany's phone, that helped them to zero in on that time frame of 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m.? Everything in this probable cause affidavit, and any probable cause affidavit, should be very accurate and intentional. So if it wasn't very intentional to include Bethany's phone in the criteria that was used to narrow down the time frame of the likely attacks, her name would not be here. And on the other hand, if it was simply Dylan texting all of the roommates in the house around or a little before 4:25 a.m. that caused them to close out that time frame of likelihood of the attacks of 4 to 4:25, then they would have said perhaps that it was the forensic download of Dylan's phone, Bethany's phone, and the other three roommates' phones. But that is not what is said here. So this makes me wonder, did Dylan, yes, in fact, contact all of the roommates, which is in contradiction to the statement of frozen shock phase? And I need to just pause and say, I am not trying to throw shade on Dylan. I don't think that she had any bad intentions in anything that she did that evening. And I feel very badly for Dylan and what she has been through. But I think that this needs to be discussed because it could be a very important piece of the puzzle. So the fact that the PCA mentions Dylan's phone and Bethany's phone, what was found on their phones that helped them to narrow down the time frame, says to me, it feels very likely that Dylan contacted all of the roommates and Bethany responded. So if that is in fact true, and Dylan contacted all of the roommates and Bethany responded, that significantly changes the story regarding what we all believe we know about that part of the case and the roommates' knowledge of what happened, on a very basic level. It changes that significantly. That would mean that Bethany knew that something was amiss in the house, whether she actually did come up the stairs or not. It said that she did not, but we still do not know. But to me, this indicates, and I have a very strong feeling that this must be the case as we put all of the pieces together, that somewhere around 4:15, 4:25 a.m., Bethany knew that something was very wrong in that house as well. So to me, this expands the question of not just why didn't Dylan contact 911, why didn't Bethany or Dylan call 911? I feel like with this case, as we go along, questions always become more complicated rather than just answered, set aside, or simplified. Please leave a comment and let me know what you guys think about that. I am so interested to hear what y'all think about that. So I personally don't just pick up kind of the topic of the day or, the thing that people are speculating about at the moment and talk about it on this channel. In fact, I intentionally do not do that, but I think there is something significant here. So as I was thinking about all of this, I remembered something that I had put in the back of my memory and I had almost forgot, which was surprising to me because of how I feel about the Chapin family and Ethan's circle of friends. Do you all remember way back when? In February, this was reported. Here's a headline. It says, "Family of Idaho murder victim Ethan Chapin questioned why surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen didn't call the cops after hearing crying and screaming, and claims she called all of the girls in the house rather than 911. So the claim here that is made by some members of the Chapin family is very much in line with what Kristi Goncalves said to the Drunk Turkey Show, that, well, the simple fact that Dylan Mortensen called all of the roommates because she was alarmed, she was scared. I'm not sure what the word is because we don't know too many details about how she was feeling truly. All we've heard is frozen shock phase, which I'm really starting to question at this point. This report regarding what the Chapins were questioning corroborates what Kristi Goncalves said just 4 weeks ago. A family member of murdered University of Idaho student Ethan Chapin has questioned why the roommates who survived the slayings did not call the police. An account believed to be belonging to Ethan's sister-in-law made several posts online before the arrest affidavit was unsealed for the suspected quadruple murders. The court document detailed how surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen came face to face with a masked man on the night of the murders. Ethan's sister-in-law has since revealed that Dylan, who was in the property at the time of the killings along with Bethany Funk,
and this is going to be a direct quote from the Reddit post where Reddit supposedly verified the identity of the poster as being who she claimed to be and the sister-in-law of Ethan Chapin. The post says, Dylan supposedly called all of the girls in the house after the crying and screaming stopped and no one answered, and she still didn't call the police. She needs to explain herself and her actions. When she was questioned about who called the police, she added, 911 caller was the friend who went to the house because Dylan called him to come over because she was scared from what she heard in the night. She goes on to say, he went to Xana and Ethan's room first, then called 911. Why Dylan or Bethany didn't call the police once is the question. Now, I do want to say that this report is completely consistent with what the two University of Idaho fraternity brothers of Ethan Chapin have told me for the past 7 months. Now, this article goes on to talk about another point that I want to raise here in this video. It says, Mortensen told cops she was awoken at around 4 a.m. by what sounded like victim Kelly Goncalves playing with her dog in a third-floor bedroom. She says she looked out of her room but didn't see anything, looking again on the second occasion when she thought she heard Dana Kernodle was crying. Mortensen stated she opened the door for the third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. The man moved towards her, she said, but she remained in a frozen shock phase as he continued past her, but let her survive. Okay, guys, I want to then refer to one small paragraph in the probable cause affidavit that says, at approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. Okay,
So a dog started barking and was heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. So we know that Murphy, Kaylee's dog, was found in Kaylee's bedroom, and we know that Maddie and Kaylee were in Maddie's bedroom. So if you're looking at the house from an outside perspective here, Xana's bedroom is all the way over here. Kaylee and Maddie are upstairs here on the 3rd floor, and Dylan is directly beneath them on the main or 2nd floor. Now, as we look at this 3D walkthrough of the inside of the King Road residence, we see that Dylan's bedroom is directly, exactly beneath Maddie's bedroom. Like Maddie's bed is on top of Dylan's bed, essentially. You see here, it's just a straight drop down. So now let's consider how close in proximity these attacks were happening to where Dylan was in her bedroom. Is it possible she didn't hear more than was disclosed in the PCA? I honestly do not think that is humanly earthly possible. Now also take into consideration that Kaylee's dog Murphy started barking and barked continuously beginning at 4:17 a.m. We know that Dylan was up around 4 a.m. She heard what she heard. She saw what she saw, that which we know through the PCA. She certainly didn't just fall back to sleep. There's no way that happened. I don't think that's physiologically possible. So when we put all of this together, everything we know that was seen and heard, plus the idea that the dog is barking right upstairs, right over Dylan's bedroom. And now I believe I know that there were phone calls being made or texts being made to all of the roommates, and that there was correspondence between Dylan and Bethany around, 4:15, 4:25, I'm estimating, and the dog is barking like crazy. Guys, this is starting to paint a picture of complete chaos in that house at that time. Now remember, a murderer was just in and out of the house. The DoorDash was just dropped off. Xana had just gone to get the DoorDash. It's not like this attack occurred. Dylan peeked outside of her door 3 times, went back in, closed it, locked it, and was like, ooh, ee, and went back to bed and all was quiet. No, guys. The picture that we now can see from what we know paints a very chaotic scene that must have had some significant noise going on. So what's up with that? Okay, so to reconcile that, let's go back to what Steve Goncalves apparently learned from the grand jury informant. According to Howard Blum, he learned that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were texting with one another during and right after the time of the murders. Now, this is incredibly consistent with the information that this channel had learned prior to this information coming out about what Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen were doing in those early morning hours, that the channel learned from the 2 students that we have been talking to since right after this tragedy occurred. This is what is written in Howard Blum's book about what Steve Goncalves apparently learned from the grand jury informant. Even more troubling, if true, what Steve had learned from people who had spoken to members of the grand jury who had been presented with the prosecution's case. It centered on the alleged behavior of 2 roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. How, he wondered, could they have slept blissfully unaware through the savage pre-dawn stabbing murders of 4 people in a narrow house with paper-thin walls? Later, a police affidavit revealed that one of the survivors, Dylan Mortensen, had in fact heard noises and left her room only to spot a masked, darkly clad intruder making his way through the residence before she retreated to her room and did not summon help for another 8 hours for reasons that have never been revealed. Yet Steve had been told the 2 survivors allegedly had only been awake while the killings had taken place, but they had heard nearly everything. I'm sorry, I inserted the word nearly there. They had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. This is very consistent with the story that we reported here on this channel. The possibility that two people had a sense of the horror while it occurred and had not acted, calling neither friends nor 911, left Steve floored. And no less confounding, they had, if his sources were as knowledgeable as he believed, then let hour after hour after hour tick away before they finally decided to summon friends. It added an entirely new band of mystery to a crime that was already bound by unanswered questions. And so Steve intensified his efforts to get answers. And in that dogged process, he came to believe that the government must have a protected source, an informant who could provide testimony that would tighten the screws that held together the case against Kohberger. Steve was determined to talk to them. He did not want to wait for the trial to get the knowledge he needed for his peace of mind. He needed relief now. After some digging, he grew convinced he had the informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to this individual to get right in his face and confront him. He would explain that he was empowered by a father's natural right to understand fully the last moments of his daughter's life. Gosh. In fact, it was his duty. It was an argument he felt that no one could reject. Oh my gosh. And at last, he would know the whole story of what had really happened to Kaylee and why. But before he could make his move, before he could get in a room and have a heart-to-heart talk with a witness, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau had sent an official letter to Steve's attorney in Moscow, Shannon Gray, warning that if there was any attempt to contact the individual Steve had been pursuing, there would be legal consequences. The witness had originally reached out to the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identities of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau was duty-bound to honor that commitment. And the letter went on to make clear, with intimidating force, the fact that Steve was the father of one of the victims gave him no dispensation from the legal consequences that accompany tampering with a government witness. Damn. So that's what we have, my friends. And then I'm just going to play you a little bit from a video that I uploaded, I don't know, a few weeks ago, that talks about the portion of the PCA that identifies 3 factors that allowed law enforcement to determine that the likely time of these horrific attacks was between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Now, again, I will say what we learned through that apparent account of Steve Goncalves, that information that he learned from the grand jury informant, it's incredibly consistent with what this channel learned from the 2 students that we've been talking to since right after this tragedy occurred. And we learned about Dylan and Bethany texting during and around the time of the murders, way before Howard Blum's book came out. So in the story that the 2 University of Idaho students told me that they know to be true about Bethany Funk's experience, they said that Bethany Funk saw out of her first floor window Bryan Kohberger walking. He was coming from the side of the house and then heading kind of diagonally across a house in front of where her window would be on that first floor across that parking lot area. So one of the important things about this testimony is that would indicate to me, to us, that he didn't park behind the 1122 King Road residence as most people first speculated. I think that this is corroborated by the weather conditions that evening and the likely slick roads, and Bryan Kohberger driving a Hyundai Elantra, allegedly not a very capable car in that weather. It would be very risky for him to park up behind the house when the only exit way is going to be very steep and likely slick. So why was Bethany Funk looking out the window? I thought that I had made it clear, but I've heard a lot of speculation talk amongst people on different channels about why Bethany Funk was awake. Bethany Funk was awake because I don't know exactly why she was awake. Was she just awake? And then she and Dylan started texting and then talking? Or did Dylan wake her up with her text and then talk? And that's why she was awake, looking out the window. I don't know how that happened. I've talked to the University of Idaho students about that. They're not very clear on that either, so I'm not going to act as though we are clear on that. But what I do know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Bethany and Dylan were in communication for a while in those early morning hours, and I know what Bethany Funk reportedly saw out her window. And the person that she saw out her window was appearing the same as the person that Dylan Mortensen saw right outside of her bedroom door. So, in the recent hearing towards the trial that happened just last week, Ann Taylor's raising questions about the accuracy and the integrity of Dylan Mortensen's witness statement made me consider all of the sources who have reported that Dylan Mortensen was texting around the time of the murders, and the sources that further went on to say that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were texting during the time of the murders. And of course, I just shared with you the information that I learned from the two students that are our source from the University of Idaho, and I guess we will all still have to wait until the trial comes out to decipher whether all of these details are 100% accurate or not.